This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. This is a man that you've heard me reference on this channel multiple times before. His work is pretty good. I refer anybody who's interested in the salary cap to it. Ladies and gentlemen, I got Jack DUFFIN on. We're going to preview free agency. We're going to talk about the Browns salary cap stuff. But Jack, how's everything going, man?
It's good. It's that time of year. Christmas is it's about a week away. When the absolute anarchy. I love the information on roster building because people can talk about, what does the team value, everything. We start getting to see dollar values put on players' performances, what a team's willing to pay. And that just gives us insight into everything Andrew Berry's thinking, because we hear all the rumors. It's like, they're interested in this player, they're interested in that. Yeah, fine. What are they willing to actually part with? And this is where the proof's in the pudding. If they pay X amount for a guy, that's what they value him. If they don't go sign some other player, maybe they don't value that position. So it's fascinating.
One of the things I hear a lot in my comment section is the sentiment that since the cap went up, that also means like similar to like 2016 in the NBA, that the price of the average free agent is going to jump up dramatically, kind of canceling out any increase that there is in the salary cap. Is that like a one-to-one thing, or is that something where like at the top of the market, maybe the money might go up, but for guys at the middle to low end of that market, the money doesn't change that dramatically?
Yeah, so for the players in the market, their value is going to go up. But the advantage, and particularly the Browns currently, probably more than any real team in the league, just because they have so many deals already done. Someone like Myles Garrett's playing on $25 million a year. He's got 3 more years on that contract already signed. So when the cap rises, that doesn't help him. And that helps the Browns massively because they've still got Myles Garrett at $25 million. But what you're now seeing is, hey, Christian Wilkins is going to get $25 million. If 3 years ago, you're not telling me Christian Wilkins is getting Myles Garrett money, but that's where the real benefit comes in. So for a team that might have all this cap space and a young quarterback, say the Texans, perfect example, they haven't got as much buying power as the fact that David Njoku's now cheap. Myles Garrett's now cheap. You've got all of these guys that are becoming really cheap because the cap's growing. So the Browns are in a great spot. If you've got a load of money you now want to spend because of free agency, well, everything you want to buy just went up dramatically in price.
So it's a good year to have guys under the cap, but might not be a good year to add a bunch of dudes to the cap, or at least the price is just going to be up, right? Because the salary cap's been going up. So speaking of the salary cap, right? There are things I think a lot of people get caught up on when they talk about the salary cap, and I think that affects how they kind of paint it. And there are people kind of painting these doom and gloom stories about the Browns salary cap situation like 3 weeks ago, and then the news drops that the salary cap rises. That's something that you've been anticipating. I mean, in almost every article you've written this year, but it seems to catch people off guard. What are the things that like people are used to looking for, whether it be because they're used to interacting with the salary cap, like on Madden, or, just how people have traditionally talked about the salary cap versus how it actually functions? Because the salary cap's kind of like accounting, right? Like, so not everything that you have that's going to be liquid is going to be counted against the cap every year.
Yeah, so far too much focus goes on what the salary cap for a player and the salary cap charges and what is their dead cap if you release them. People have a massive fascination in those two things. And quite frankly, as someone that looks at the salary cap and everything all the time, I barely look at either what does a player cost on the salary cap and what is his dead cap if you release him, anything like that. The reason why, there's two things that are effectively really important. What are you paying a player? So if you take DeShaun Watson, for instance, he gets paid $46 million a year on his deal. That's the really key number because that's what they're paying into his bank account. How they then manipulate that and account for it, as you said, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of it. The key thing is he's getting 46 million. And then the other thing is guarantees. So when a player runs out of guarantees in his deal, they can just get rid of them. So like Wyatt Teller, if they don't want to keep Wyatt Teller this year, it's 14 million they can save and they can go spend that on another player. And what Jimmy Haslam, the Browns are really lucky. Jimmy Haslam is just throwing cash at this team more than any other owner in the league. And so that's not even close. 50 million above league average for the last 3 years is what Jimmy Haslam has spent on the team. And what that's allowing them to do is whatever the salary cap is, they'll spend roughly 120, 121% of that in terms of paying players. So lots of people are like, oh, can they create some more money with a restructure? Will they do that? I'm here to say it basically doesn't matter. Andrew Berry will deal with all that. The key thing to focus on is they're probably going to spend cash terms about 120, 121% of the salary cap in cash because that's in 2 years' time where the salary cap will be. So if you want to keep an eye on it, I keep it as my pinned tweet, but they're probably going to spend about 307 million giving two players physically this year just for their top 53. That's not accounting for like they might sign a Kareem Hunt or Joe Flacco as we saw last season during the year for injury. I'm just focused on the 53-man roster that will enter the first
Mhm.
week of the season.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting spot that the Browns are in going into this free agency period because there are two schools of thought, right? You want to maintain your flexibility just in case a certain situation, some situations pop up. You don't know like what DeShaun's going to give you this year. If he does play well, then you're in a better spot. But if he doesn't, then you might be in a little bit of a rougher spot. There's another school of thought that says, "Hey man, you went 11-6 with a team that had a ton of injuries last year. You feel like if you just get either one less Nick Chubb injury or one less DeShaun Watson injury, this team that has a real chance to win a Super Bowl, this might be the year where it's like, hey, these guys are getting 27, going into 28, some of them 29, going into 30. This might be the year where you want to push all the chips in and go all in. Where do you lean on that conversation, and where do you think the Browns lean on that conversation? Do you think that they see this year as a golden opportunity to just say, hey, we might have to sacrifice something down the line, but we want to make sure that we're as equipped as possible for this year because we feel like this is one of our best shots with this core.
Yeah, so I'm very much business as usual. So not the school of like, oh, let's sit on our hands, not do anything, but let's not go crazy.
Mhm,
So, and if we take that sort of 120% of the budget, and part of the reason why it's about that is effectively they're spending the salary cap in 2 years' time. And because the salary cap keeps going up, that's roughly where the 120% comes in. So if you wanted to say, hey, let's be careful and build loads more flexibility, yeah, we could spend less and we sit there, maybe we bring it back down to about 110%. Or you could go crazy and go, let's spend 130%. Why I'd say don't go out and spend 130% is because you're just going to have to balance that out in 1 or 2 years' time. And
mhm.
so rather than being like 50 million above league average every single year, and that's something you could do for the next 10 years and you would be perfectly comfortable with doing it. If you went less below 130%, well, maybe the next couple of years you have to do 110 and you balance back out. It's much better just to say, we'll spend more than every other team in the league and we're going to do that every single year because you're just in a really good spot where you can keep doing this year on year, spreading out those cap hits. And that's why, just based on space of what they've got now, there's 41 million to play with. So that's a decent amount of cash to throw around. And that's net. So if you went and signed a guy for 5 million, effectively take 1 million off because I've built that on a 53-man roster being there. So 0.8 million for like, we don't have a punter at the minute on the roster. So if you signed Corey Bjorquez for 2 million, it'd only be like 1.2 million net out of that 41 million. So I think business as usual, right in the middle of. Usually, I'm the one throwing at very different opinions, but I'm quite sensible and sort of steady with this. Of just let's keep doing what they're doing, and if we can spend 50 million more league average every year, there's a good chance we'll see some playoff success. Will it be a Super Bowl? Who knows? That's a lot of luck and randomness that has to happen. But let's just keep outspending the league, and maybe the luck will fall in our favor one day.
It's an interesting way, like, because again, who knows where this team could have went this year if they just were healthy, right? Um, so with that in mind, how crazy like do you think a deal can be for a single player in free agency if that is the plan?
Yeah, so I think you're probably maybe one player goes into that sort of 10 to 14 range, but I'm expecting most of the guys to be like 6 million and less. Because the only player of note you're losing is Darius Smith at the moment. Everyone else is probably doesn't cross 3 million. Taki Walker, Bjorquez, any of these guys are going to be cheap. So Zedarius, he was on 10.5. It'll probably maybe go up to 12. But you're not really losing anyone, which is a great position to be in. In terms of extensions, I don't think they'll extend Newsom, but JOK is probably the only one out there that really stands out as a young player that's going to need a significant pay rise. So maybe 9.5 million of that 41 million goes to him. I just don't see like a Christian Wilkins, for instance. That's a popular name people have thrown out. That takes 25 million of your 41 million budget. So if you basically do Wilkins and then you do JOK, 4.7 million roughly for your draft picks, that's basically it. So there's no replacing Zedarius. There's no replacing all the other parts of the roster you want. You might be able to bring in some min price free agents like your Rodney McLeods, where it's costing you like net 0.3, 0.4 million. But that's effectively the budget gone. The other side of the argument is, hey, we could start shipping players off to free up a bit of space. Maybe Wyatt Teller, 14 million. Nick Chubb, 12.2. Maybe you could swing a trade for Jedrick Wills. That's 14 point something million. So you could move some guys off, but I think they're much better going, let's not do anything crazy. Let's just supplement the roster because, as you said, it was a really, really good roster last year. Next off season, anything can happen because effectively there's two players with guaranteed money next year. You've got Grant Delpit, you've got DeShaun Watson. I don't think there's another player on the entire roster. Oh, Denzel Ward, actually. There's 3 players that have guarantees in their contract for next year. And that's it. So that means Andrew Berry can have as many decisions as he wants to make then. And you could see a significant overhaul. They could get rid of Conklin. They could get rid of Thornhill. They might pay Martin Emerson, but we can get really wild next off season. Have all those Christian Wilkins style deals. They're well on the table that year. I just don't see it this year.
And one of the things I think is interesting is this year as it relates to DeShaun Watson, right? Like I think this year, if he's able to stay healthy and he plays, I think the Browns are like, okay, we're getting the guy that we thought we were getting. We're gonna move forward with the plan with him at quarterback. But I do think also like if he can't finish this year for whatever reason, or he plays 8 games or something like that, and it's on and off, that gets to the point to where you feel like you can't trust the guy to be out there. And once you get to that point with the quarterback, I mean, it's hard to get back. Like, look what happened to Carson Wentz's career, right? Like, the second he got to that point, no team ever trusted him again, and then it was just never the same with him. The confidence was never there with him. If things go in a bad direction with DeShaun, right? Let's say he does not stay healthy, or the Browns, for whatever reason, make the determination that maybe this isn't who we want to hitch our wagon on going forward. What does that look like for the Browns, right? Because, the Russell Wilson release happened, and people are asking, is that something the Browns will have on the table for next year? With how that works and everything, I don't think that's something that the Browns would do. But it is something to consider, like, hey, with everything being on the table next year, positive and negative, could there be a situation where you can see the Browns going in a clear direction of saying, hey, we're going to have to reload for a different window?
Yeah, so what I would expect them to do is they restructure this year, and it might not be so they won't do all their restructures all in one go. And the reason for that is they don't want to turn around and create another like 70 million of cap space. And then when they're chatting to teams about extensions and free agent signings, they're like, hey, you've got 65 million of cap space or whatever the number might be. Yeah, well, we're not taking a friendly deal. You're going to give us what we want. You just press a button effectively with restructures and the money's created. Slightly different maybe with Amari Cooper because the Cowboys did the contract, and then whatever they work out with Nick Chubb, slight pay cut, however that works. They're the two that might have to be done, but everyone else, they just press a button and it's done. So really easy on those. But where they go with DeShaun Watson, I'd expect them to restructure this year, and that might not happen until August. That's fine, doesn't worry me. Then after this year, say it is a car crash and doesn't go, I'd expect them to draft someone. and I think that would be the replacement route they go. But the issue is, it's a really good team, so they're not picking in the top 5. They're probably not picking in the top 10. Even if they try to trade up, it's probably going to be 10 to 12 range, and that's going to be the 2025 first, the 2026 first, just to probably get up there because naturally they're going to win games. They might without DeShaun Watson, they'll probably still make the playoffs. This team's just too good to fail. Um, and then that's you pick up someone, and it's probably going to be more of a developmental player than a hey, we're going to throw him out there week
Yeah.
one. So DeShaun Watson's your starter for 2025. You got a rookie backing up, and then after that 2025 season, that's the point where you could go either rookie hasn't worked out, in which case maybe you trade the rookie. What do you do? Um, or you get into the final year, and another team might then go, actually, we'll take DeShaun Watson off your hands, pay him 10, 15 million. We then eat 30, 31 million, and then off he goes. And that might be the route they go. But I would just keep pushing it out. And lots of people are like, oh, just take the 60 million this year. Makes no sense. The salary cap's going up. And the reason Jimmy Haslam can keep giving all this cash to Andrew Berry is because they're spreading out cap hits. Restructures, spreading out cap hits, rolling money over. That's how you create your flexibility. If where people are saying don't restructure, that's the direct opposite of flexibility. You're tying yourself into positions and you're making it really, really tough to manage the cap. Restructure everyone, push it all out, and that's where you can just have different options on the table. And if we're talking about an 80 million dead cap hit in year 6 after DeShaun Watson's done his entire time with Cleveland, that's not that hard to deal with. The cap's going to be like 320 million there. That's perfectly fine because you just restructure everyone else. You've got a rookie quarterback. Business keeps rolling along. You could deal with a 80 million dead cap and still spend 120 million of the cap in cash, and you can just keep this going. So I've got zero concern over managing Watson out, but I think the route to go would be draft a quarterback a year in the future. Maybe DTR looks solid and can just give a serviceable, which could work out if he's dirt cheap.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the Browns are looking at this and thinking kind of the Jordan Love kind of plan. I know DeShaun is considerably younger than Aaron Rodgers was when they drafted him, but you look at guys who've played the way, like the specific play style of DeShaun, and you start to get worried once they hit to 31, 32, the same way you would for a traditional pocket passer like 34, 35, right? So the timeline could be accelerated where, they might just be like, hey, might just draft somebody if it makes sense in the first round. And it's just going to be what it's going to be. And maybe you do get like a couple of good years out of DeShaun, but it might not be something where you get like 6 or 7 good years. Like all those possibilities are on the table. And I think the Browns try to prepare for all of it. And Andrew Berry, look, he's shown he's not unwilling to move off a quarterback, right? If he has to.
No, if you do the same thing and you say to Deshaun Watson, hey, you've only played 8 games again, we've got to be ready for a worst case scenario. We're going to draft someone in 2025. You can remain the starter for the next 2 years. This rookie is going to sit behind you for 2 years, be ready for whenever you go down. It's not our fault you can't remain healthy. He's probably going to turn around and go, fair enough. And I'm happy for him to then start both of those years, but then they can sort of transition ready for the future. And who knows, if he has a career resurgence, as Aaron Rodgers went from like fringe, no one knows what he's doing, back to MVP level, they might turn around and go, actually, we'll keep rolling with this guy. And
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun Watson might come back. But then at the same time, they're protected for, oh, if it doesn't work out, so be it. They've got to do what's best for the team. They're not here to do what's best for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, yeah. Fair enough, right? The Browns free agency situation this year is going to be interesting. What do we kind of talked about what their overall budget's going to be for this off season? Do you think that the Browns are in for any surprises? Like, is there any reading that you get that they might do something that maybe we're not expecting right now? Or do you think that kind of the expectations for the Browns this free agency are a little bit higher than what they should be amongst the fan base?
Yeah, I think they've got a little bit bigger than they should be. They saw last year where it's really bold because there was a lot more space to bring guys in. I think it will be a little bit more toned down this year, and they lead the league already in 10 million plus 10 million a year plus players. So it's not one where they're getting rid of a load of expensive guys and they can bring someone else in. They're already really, really costly. And JOK, no doubt, probably joins that club, maybe scraping in at 10 million or just above it. So they're going to add already, maybe bring back Zedarius. That's a lot of money being thrown around just to begin with. So I'm not expecting any big splashes. But who knows? They could look at a guy like Mike Williams and go, actually, really want to add him. And then it comes down to, well, how do you balance adding a Mike Williams? That could be Wyatt Teller. And lots of people have said, oh, I don't see why they get rid of Wyatt Teller. The rumours are out there last off-season, around the time of free agency, they were ringing around teams discussing potentially Wyatt Teller in a trade scenario. The reason why they had to trade him last year is he still had guarantees in his deal, so there was no option to cut him. He's got no guarantees now, and they might look at that and go, hey, it's 14 million. We can probably do better with a cheap guard and add Mike Williams. And lots of people try and look at these things in silos. If you're saying, actually, we want to add a 20 million wide receiver, what's it going to cost? Oh, we need to trade or just cut Wyatt Teller at 14 million. Hey, Mike Williams only costs 6 million now, and 6 million plus you can get like Van Rotten, John Feliciano for the 49ers. You get one of those guys at like 3 million in free agency. That might be the package where they go, actually, that's what's going to work. So I wouldn't rule out someone going. When they deal with whatever happens with Nick Chubb, that's probably going to save 4 or 5 million of cash that they can invest. So that 41 million might become 46 million. I expect where he'll take like, maybe they guarantee 8 million of his deal and then 4.2 million becomes incentives. So that they'll play around and do some stuff there, which will boost that budget a little.
Yeah, Mike Williams is an interesting one. Like, do you think one, do you think he ends up like outright getting just released by the Chargers? And then two, if you do bring him in, are you paying what his current contract is right now, or is that something where it's got to get restructured or redone? And what would that number look like for him? Because the wide receiver numbers have been ridiculous, but also he is somebody who's been injured the last couple of years, so you would imagine that would hurt his value, especially like in the open market.
Yeah, so it depends. If someone's willing to trade for him, they'll take on that 20 million and he'll probably turn around and go, no, I'm not going to restructure. If you want me to bring my cap number down, you're going to extend me
Hmm.
and I'll have a long-term deal. So he might turn around and go, hey, you can pay me 40 million guaranteed and 20 million on the back if the team want to walk away from it. But I'm not taking a pay cut because there's so many teams that want him. So he's got a bit of leverage there. He's not going to naturally walk in the building and go, oh yeah, you can restructure me. I don't mind. I'll play for the team. He's got to be interested in getting himself more guarantees beyond this year. So I, it's not a popular name, but I'd keep an eye on Devontae Parker.
Mm.
He's going to cost 5 million of cash this year, 5 million of cash next year. The Pats are rumored to be wanting to trade him. He just gives you solid. And what they might be looking at is going, look, we're not going to chase the high end. We're not going to go spend 12.5 million a year on Gabe Davis in free agency, but we'll just trade and bring someone in. Because if you're an upside free agent, why would you want to come to Cleveland? It's like there's uncertainty at quarterback. And then if you look around the receiver room, you've got Amari Cooper, you've got Bell, you've got Elijah Moore, you've got Tillman, you've got David Njoku. There's a lot of mouths to feed. So you're not going to probably come to Cleveland and elevate your value. You're probably looking to Cleveland to cash in. So it's probably one where they need to look at the trade market if they want more wide receivers than free agency. Unless they're going lower on the list, they might bring in like an Isaiah McKenzie, maybe even a DJ Shark could be an option. But any of the bigger names, I don't get why they want to come to Cleveland. There's just too many receiver options here that they're not going to come to Cleveland and suddenly they're going to get force fed a load of targets and make a load of money.
Yeah, it wouldn't it does from that perspective. Like, I don't know if it would be kind of a situation where maybe somebody sees like a role that they could carve themselves out here, or maybe like in Mike Williams' case, he has that chemistry with DeShaun Watson already, so maybe that's something that he might consider. It'd be interesting to see how they go about it, right? Because as much as people complain about the wide receiving room and the pass catchers that the Browns don't have, you have already an 1,000-yard guy in Amari Cooper and possibly an 1,000-yard tight end in David Njoku. So there's not really a ton of targets to go around. You also have to consider Browns are still kind of like committed to David Bell. They're still committed to Cedric Tillman. And they're very much committed to Elijah Moore too. Like we haven't even brought him up in this conversation. So it's one of those things too where I'm wondering, like, as much as Browns fans have made about that receiving room, and I do think that they could add somebody if they wanted to. I do think Andrew Berry was like telling the truth when it was like, I don't see that as one of the biggest priorities, because it's like, I mean, you look at the wide receivers in the AFC Championship, and I'm not saying they don't matter, but it's not like it's required to get to that point, right? You need DeShaun Watson to play better, like, ultimately, right? Like, you can't sit here and just flood him with wide receiver options and also be paying him what you're paying him. Like, part of the pay is like, hey, we're going to expect you to elevate some guys.
Yeah, the answer's got to come through the draft. And people
Mhm.
look at it and go, oh, but he hasn't drafted well at wide receiver. There's this, if you look at what the Bengals have done at wide receiver, and if you look at what the Browns have done at corner, people are like, the Browns are great at drafting corners. The Bengals are great at drafting wide receivers. Ward Chase, Elijah Moore, Higgins, and then Newsom. You've got Tyler Boyd and Emerson. They're all basically drafted around the same spot. It's not some secret that
Hmm.
these teams are better at drafting particular players. It's just where they've spent assets. If we picked three guys at sort of the top five, the end of the first round, and sort of the top of the second end of the second round, you would have better players. You can't just draft wide receivers in picks like 90 to 100 and then expect them to be as good as guys taken in the top 20 to 30 picks. They need to pick wide receiver high, and that's it. Now's the time where they need to get on and do it. I was hoping for Josh Downs and we got Cedric Tillman. It's like there's talent out there. They just need to invest and just keep picking high, and it'll eventually work itself out.
You think they stay at 55 this year? Or do you think they move back to like 63 or something like that?
If there's the right trade deal, I could see
Yeah.
them moving back.
'Cause I don't know. At 55, they would have to take a wide receiver there, right? Like they would probably have that would be the only position that would make it, like, unless like a guard pops up that they really
Tackle.
like. Yeah, or a tackle. Like maybe what Samatia might be somebody that they're interested in, or I don't know. But there are like a couple. What positions do you see when you look at this free agent class versus what the draft class looks like? And you're like, hey, the Browns would be more apt to go after these positions in free agency versus these positions in the draft.
Yeah, so for me, I look at free agency and it's all about filling holes. So if there's anyone they need to start into action, they fill that during free agency. You should get to the end of this month, end of March, and you're happy with your 53-man roster. And then the draft's all about 2025 and the future. So you're not drafting for a guy to play now. When you've got a roster this good, it's just not the way it's going to work. So the draft is like, who can we pick to replace someone in a year's time? So guard's perfect. You're going to draft a guard, either Batonio retires or Teller leaves. You've already drafted someone a year out to replace them. That's got to be the focus. So that's sort of I look two very different things. Free agency is need. What do we need now? We might need another edge. We definitely need some defensive tackles. Whereas what do we need in a year's time? We need a guard. Let's draft that. And that's sort of the difference between the two.
All right, Jack. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate the insight. Let them know where they can find you. I try to point them to you as often as I can, but let everybody know where they can find you and get all of your stuff, man.
Yeah, so on Twitter, it's at Jack Duffin, DUFFIN. My pinned tweet always has the latest Browns cap position, cash they're likely to spend out the remainder of the offseason, any sort of key articles linked in there. But all my written work's all over at the OBR. I do some podcasting with Paul Brown. We've been a bit rogue the last few weeks and I haven't had time to record, but we'll be getting back soon at some point.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys check them out. Jack, thank you for coming on. Everybody else, thank you for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.